Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inspired and Empowered Living TV show and podcast for a thriving life and business. We are live Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on talk4tv.com, w4wn.com, and my YouTube channel. And today's show, we are going into part 2, creating thriving relationships in life and business. And we'll continue where we left off last week. Your relationships shape everything: your confidence, your energy, your success, and your income. In this powerful episode, we'll explore what it truly means to create thriving relationships in both your personal and professional life. From romantic partnerships and friendships to clients and colleagues and collaborations, you'll learn how to cultivate connections rooted in respect, health, healthy communication, emotional safety, and aligned values. When your relationships thrive, your life and your business naturally expand. And so in this series, because we're creating this series, and in this series, you'll discover healthy, loving, supportive relationships, the qualities of how your self-worth impacts relationships you attract, the connection between emotional safety and business success, why boundaries are essential for intimacy and income, and how to shift from draining dynamics to empowering partnerships. The role of communication creates in clarity and trust, how to identify red flags early in life and in business, and practical steps to strengthen your most important relationship starting now. Together, let's create a life you love. I'm your host, Nancy Deutsch, licensed clinical social worker, certified hypnotherapist, and intuitive business expert. I combine my counseling, coaching, and intuitive abilities to transform your life. This show is not a replacement for therapy or counseling. It is for educational purposes only. So let's talk about what we talked a little bit about last week so that you catch up. So we were talking about how important the foundation of all healthy, thriving relationships is you. And it's the relationship with yourself and how crucial and how important that is in creating your healthy relationships, your thriving relationships. And I have some questions for you. But first, I want to remind you, or what we're going to be talking about in this episode is communication and boundaries, two of the most important skills for healthy, thriving relationships. So I'd like you to answer these questions. Have you ever avoided saying something because you didn't want to upset someone? Do you struggle Do you sometimes or struggle with saying yes, but you really want to say no? Do you feel drained after certain conversations or interactions? And do you struggle to ask for what you truly need? So, healthy, thriving relationships don't happen by accident. They are created through healthy, honest communication and respectful boundaries. And all the questions that I just asked you are all part of what you need as the foundation for you to be able to take your truth and what you need, your wants, your desires into a relationship and then be able to communicate it clearly and in healthy, appropriate ways. So let's talk a little bit first about what healthy communication looks like. And we have Anastasia saying, yep. So love it. Okay, so what does healthy communication look like? And communication is not just about talking. There's so much more that needs to happen in healthy communication. And it's about connection and understanding and deepening that connection in your personal life. It's about being able to deepen the connection in your personal relationships. And that creates more intimacy. In your business life, that's about being able to really have that deeper connection with your clients, knowing what your clients' needs and wants are so that you can serve them to the best of your ability. And the more that you connect and understand your clients or your colleagues, so whether it's personal or business, you want to understand the people in your life, your colleagues, so that you can have successful, healthy collaborations. And in your personal life, you want connection and understanding in your romantic relationship, in your friendships. And all of this is crucial. So let's talk about some key elements in healthy communication. Now, the first thing is presence. And you need to be present with each other. So if you are wanting to get your point across and you are really excited or angry or upset, that's a good time to have that healthy communication. I always say that you want to process your triggers so that when you have healthy communication, you're able to communicate in a calm, clear, and be really present with the other person. And also clear communication, that you are clear in what you want to communicate to the other person, your thoughts, your feelings, your wants, your desires, your needs. All of those are important in the healthy, clear communication. And being present with another person is being able to look into their eyes and be able to really hear them on a deeper level. And that is true listening. One of the key essential pieces is listening skills. Listening, so crucial, so important in healthy, clear communication. And so you want to be able to really listen to the people that you're and being present with them. So important. So we have a few comments and questions coming in. So let me get to those. Mickey says, communication is not always easy. And that is true. It's not always easy. Like I was saying, are you one of the people who avoid really speaking your truth because you don't want to, because you're avoiding conflict? You're avoiding conflict. And if you're avoiding conflict, you're not allowing yourself to speak your truth. And then what happens is anger and resentment can build and actually destroy relationships. And so that's why it's so important to learn how to have those important, healthy conversations, which we're going to talk about more. And I'm not saying this is easy. All right. This may be the most challenging thing that you need to work on in your life to your personal life and your business. Because if you're somebody who says yes when you really need to say no, boundaries, that's an issue. And remember, I said the foundation of all relationships is you. This is part of what I'm talking about. It's all about the relationship you have with yourself and the ability to have the honesty and self-respect to be able to honor yourself so that you can then communicate that to other people in healthy ways. And we're going to talk more about that. Misty says, not everyone communicates in the same way. Yes, that is true. Not always. Okay, I'll get to the next comment she put in second. Not what happens is you're right. Not everybody communicates in the same way. But here's the thing. When you have that healthy communication, you're going to want to have a structure so that you are communicating in healthy ways. Unhealthy communication, there can be many ways people communicate, but in healthy communication, there's a structure and a strategy in your ability to be able to have those healthy communication. So really important to learn that healthy communication strategy. And we're going to get to that today. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. And if you feel like we need to go deeper in it, we can do that as well. So, and then Misty says, sometimes people's ways of communication don't match, and it makes it difficult to get anywhere. And that's why, Misty and everybody else, having that structure and strategy of that healthy, clear communication is that everybody's on the same page so that you're each communicating in that healthy way, and that each of you get a chance to communicate in those healthy ways. And that's how healthy communication happens. It's both people are being heard, both people are being received, both people are being understood. That's healthy communication. And other key elements of healthy communication is honesty. It's being able to express your thoughts and feelings truthfully without any manipulation or avoidance. Clarity. And remember, I said, before you communicate to another person, you want to have done your work. If you've gotten triggered by them, then you want to make sure that you understand what the trigger is. Now, in personal relationships, you may want to understand it and go deeper and have a communication about that with the other person, which leads to greater intimacy. In business, you want to be able to keep it straightforward to the point so that you're clearly expressing what you need to in a way so that you don't have to go deeper into, unless it's something that you're intentionally doing. And going deeper, whether it's personal or business, you want to do that with intention and really conscious intention, that it's not happening by accident. So so that leads to intimacy, and it also can lead to greater income, because when more and more people get to know you and to get to like you and trust you, that will help you grow in your personal relationships and in your business relationships and business success. Being clear is really crucial. Having respect for yourself, respect for the other, and respect for each other. And it's being able to listen, using those listening skills with openness and not being defensive. If you're going into defense mode, then you're still being triggered and you have your work to do. Because what happens is, if you're in defense, you will probably raise up their defenses, and then it escalates, and you will not get your point across, and you will not be hearing them. So it's really important to have that openness, and really coming from that place of openness and clarity, and instead of defensiveness. And then each person needs to take emotional responsibility for their feelings. So you own your feelings and you don't blame others for theirs. And then they are able to own their emotional responsibility, means they own their feelings. So, for example, instead of saying, "You never listened to me," in healthy communication, it would be, "I feel unheard when I'm interrupted." And that keeps the conversation being constructive rather than confrontational. So Misty says, people are not always honest with themselves. That is true. But I am going to support all of you. You're listening to this show for a reason. And I'm here to support you in working on that honesty with yourself. Because the more honest you are with yourself, the more you will be able to communicate in an honest way with another. But it starts with yourself. And you may want to do some journaling. Like, what is it, if I'm being honest with myself, what I need to know most about this conversation with such and such is what? What do I need? What do I feel about what's happening? It's learning to understand yourself. It's not just being honest, but learning to understand what's going on underneath. So, like, for example, I'm going to give you example of the Jenny and Jimmy. Now, Jenny, what would happen for her? Jenny and Jimmy are married, still are, and because of the work they did together, okay, they were able to overcome the challenges. So, for example, in their relationship, Jenny would say something, or she would do something, and Jimmy would go into a rage. And what I mean by a rage is she starts screaming and yelling at her. When that would happen, she would shut down and she couldn't talk or speak or even move. She what happened is she froze. She had the freeze response that I've talked about. And so what we worked on when I worked with each of them is Jenny got to see that Jimmy was triggering her father because her father was a rager also. And so when Jimmy would go into the rage, it would trigger those old feelings, and she would regress into the child self and she would freeze because it was too scary for her to even communicate or do anything. That's what happens when you freeze. It's like you shut down, you go, and you're not able to respond, you're not able to react. That is part of the stress reaction. Jimmy was the aggressor, and he ended up screaming and yelling. That's an aggressor reaction. And then there's flight. Some people might want to hide or run away from the situation, not deal, avoid. That's another way people would deal with a situation. So Jenny started understanding that she was getting triggered. And as we worked together, I started helping Jenny be able to develop that muscle of loving herself more and honoring herself more, being able to express her needs and wants in healthy ways, because I was working with each of them individually and as a couple. Jimmy got to understand that Jenny was triggering his mother. And when she was triggering his mother, it would set him off. And he would rage and have a temper tantrum like a 2-year-old. And as we worked together, we worked on Jimmy having tools and skills for anger management, and him being able to understand what was being triggered, both of them. As they understood more and they gained more self-awareness, they were then able to come together to communicate in healthy, constructive ways. And their relationship started thriving. They became closer and more intimate. Now, in a business situation, it would be different. In a business situation, you're going to do your work. And you're not really going to be sharing that necessarily with your clients, but you want to make sure that you're being that professional self. In a business situation, professional, with colleagues, it's you are the person with the awareness of, oh, someone just triggered me. I'll give you an example of a business situation that happened for me. So I had colleagues. I was in an office space, and we shared this lobby space, and we each had our own individual offices. And I'll call him Evan. Evan, what he did was he put this huge sign right in the middle of our shared office space. And I got really triggered. And I worked through my feelings of anger and all the other feelings that were coming up for me before I spoke to him. Now, when I spoke to him, I wasn't going to communicate all the intricate details of what came up for me. That wouldn't have been appropriate in a business situation. But what I did clearly communicate is I'm not comfortable with this sign being where it is, the way it is. Please. And my need was to put it on your side of the lobby. And that's what he did. And it was fine. So that's an example of the different types of healthy communication that can happen in both personal and business professional relationships. So if any of you have any questions, you'll let me know. So let's talk about ways why communication breaks down. So what happens? Now, I talked about the fight, flight, freeze. If there is raging, screaming, yelling, you're not going to have, and I do this all the time with clients coaching, and I've talked about it on the show before. If you or the other person is in a rage or really angry or really frustrated or really emotional, whatever that emotion is, if you're crying and crying, then that's not the time to have the conversation. It's about learning to take what I call the time out. And it's about calming yourself down and using your tools and techniques for that emotional regulation. And we've talked about that in past shows. And it's learning to use coping skills and tools to help you. Breathing is one of them. And I talked earlier a little bit about journaling. That's another one. And it's learning to be able to process before you meet with each other. Now, so do not engage with another person in conversation if there's a lot of emotions. It probably won't be a constructive conversation for the most part. And so really support you in your timeouts, especially when it comes to anger and rage, whether it's you or the other person. When someone's so emotional, they won't be able to hear you. If they're in major fear or you're in major fear, if you're in major anger or they're in major anger, if you're in crying and you're all upset or they're all upset, the communication will be interrupted. So it's really important for each of you to have your time to breathe, to process, to be in that energy so that you can come together in healthy communication. And then sometimes people avoid conversations because they fear conflict. That's one of the questions that I talked about earlier. But what happens is when there's avoidance of communication, there's resentment. Resentments build, misunderstandings build up, emotional distance builds up. And that harms relationships, all relationships, no matter across the board. So it's finding that way to have that healthy communication in spite of the conflict, to be able to overcome it so that you're clearly communicating and moving to a whole new level of healthy communication. And that's what happened with Jenny and Jimmy. As they worked through their own trauma, or as they worked through their own limiting beliefs and emotions, they were able to come together and be able to hear each other and listen to each other and understand each other. And the relationship grew. Another way that communication breaks down is through people pleasing. So you may be struggling with that people pleasing issue. And many heart centered women struggle with that. Many heart centered people struggle with people pleasing. One of the biggest issues I see across the board in the people that I work with is that people pleasing. And what happens with people pleasing is that you end up suppressing your needs. Then you start over accommodating. And then you fear disappointing others. But what happens because of that is it'll lead to anger, frustration, resentment, which is the breakdown of the communication. And over time, it will lead to burnout and an imbalance in any relationship. So it's really important for you to be able to really learn to take care of yourself and learn how to express your needs, your wants, your desires in healthy ways. And to trust that if somebody is really wanting to connect with you and support you and understand you, then it's being able to hear them and they hear you. Respect, that honesty, respect all of the things that I was talking about earlier. And then that what I was talking about earlier is if someone, emotional reactivity, which is what I was talking about, because if you or the other person feels attacked or unsafe, you or they may respond with defensiveness, criticism, shutting down, like the freezing, like I was talking about, or anger. And in that emotional reactivity, like I said, communication, healthy communication does not happen. It just doesn't. And so, what's going to be important is learning how to pause and respond instead of reacting. Now, sometimes you may be able to do it with yourself in the moment if you've learned how to do that. Sometimes you may need to do that time out, like I was talking about, and maybe you need to come back and make a plan to come back. And this is important. The two of you agree on a mutually agreeable time for you to come back and talk to each other. So it may be a day, 2 days, or a week, or you may need time to process. I mean, I've had situations where in personal relationships, I said, I'm not ready to talk. And then I get the intuition like, okay, now I can do it. And I'll contact you. I say, I'll contact you when I'm ready. Or if you feel like you can work through it, then you can make a plan for talking in a day or a few days or a week or such. So let's talk boundaries. Boundaries, so important. I mean, boundaries are so misunderstood. And boundaries are not about controlling other people. Boundaries are essential self-care. It's about clearly communicating what is acceptable to you and what is not. And when you have clear boundaries that you clearly communicate, it protects your emotional energy, your time, your values, and your well being. Examples of healthy boundaries in your life. It means saying no when you're overwhelmed, not tolerating disrespectful behavior, protecting your personal time and your self care time. It means being honest about your needs. And really, part of the honesty, and we were talking about that self honesty, is really getting clear what your needs are. And it's really learning what your needs, your wants, and desires. When you've been a people pleaser or you've been what I call codependent, and sometimes I work with people that just don't even know because they've been giving to others their whole life. So if you are a giver and you've been giving to others your whole life, your really important work is to discover what your truth is, being honest with yourself about what your needs are. What is it that you need? What is it that you want? What is it that you desire? So that's part of your job in healthy communication. And then examples of boundaries in business. So for entrepreneurs and professionals, boundaries are essential in business. Examples include clear session times and policies, respect for paying agreements, not responding to messages at all hours. If I know, like if somebody texts me, texts are big because people can be texting all time, but I actually put on my do not disturb. At a certain point, I'm not going to be answering them. And it's about really respecting your time, your energy, your boundaries, protecting your intellectual property, and choosing clients that are soul aligned. I tell all my clients, do not work with someone intuitively. If intuitively you're feeling like it's not a good match, do not work with them. And what I do is I tune in on a soul level. Is this a soul aligned client? Without your boundaries, you can very easily experience burnout. So let's do some quick boundary and communication tools, simple ones. There's the pause. Before responding, pause and ask yourself. Now, again, this also makes a difference with how activated you are. If you're in emotional activation, then you need to calm yourself down because one little pause or you won't be able to be in that place. So ask yourself, if you're able to, breathe and ground and ask, what is true for me right now? And I also invite you to ask that question of yourself when you need to process. What is it that I need right now? What is it that I want right now from this relationship, from this connection? The clearer you are, the more you can communicate. Now, you may not totally always communicate all of it, but you having the clarity is really crucial and important for you. And what do I desire right now from this person, this connection, this relationship? Whether it's personal or business, it's the clearer you are, the better it is. Then the clear request. Healthy communication includes clearly asking for what you need. So you want to start with the needs because that is a bottom line. This is what I really need right now. Because when you have healthy relationships, you want to be able to give each other what you need to help you. And what happens in healthy relationships when you give each other what you need, you both grow and the relationships gets healthier and expands. And so, for example, if you're reactive, you may need to say, I need some time. I need some time to process or to think about this before I can respond to you. And that would be you taking your time out. So, very important. Then there's the respectful no. Saying no does not require over explaining. In 12-step programs, they have a thing called no is a complete sentence. In AA, I know they had that, and it's so true. So it's okay for you to say no, and you do not have to explain why you're saying no. It's okay to say, I'm not available for that, or that's not going to work for me, or I need to prioritize other commitments. Again, healthy relationships is a respecting of your boundary, and the other person is respecting your boundaries. And I will tell you, the more you respect your boundaries, the more they will respect your boundaries, which comes all from the bottom line. You're the foundation of every healthy relationship, whether it's in life or in business. So we talked about today the healthy boundaries and how crucial and how important it is. And we talked about clear communication. And now next week, we are going. Okay, I see your question, Anastasia, and I will answer that question next week. All right, so stay tuned next week for Anastasia's question. All right. So next week, we are going to be talking about, in part 3, we're going to be exploring recognizing the red flags and breaking unhealthy relationship patterns. So again, we'll go over how to identify unhealthy dynamics early, why people repeat relationship patterns, the role of intuition in recognizing warning signs, and how to shift towards healthier relationships in both life and business. And I look forward to connecting with you more next week for more inspired and empowered living. We are live Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on talk4tv.com, w4wn.com, my YouTube channel. And you can hear the podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, Amazon, and many more. And I wish you all an inspired and empowered day, night, and week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye for now.